I'm Andy, I'm co-founder of Earmax Media. We're a specialist podcast media agency, and we combine podcast media plans with really highly curated, relevant, creative audio ads. And this is Jay.
And I'm Jay. I'm Global Marketing Director for Explore Worldwide, which is an adventure travel company.
And today we're just going to take you through the true crimes of podcast media planning. You can see what we did there in the title. I might just stand over here so you can see. So within podcast media buying, there is a lot of wastage, and a lot of people don't do it very well. And there's kind of three main crimes, I guess, that lead people to this. So firstly, thinking of the medium as planning audio all at once. There's a big difference between a ad served in break in the mid-roll of your favorite podcast to an ad served through a smart speaker whilst you're doing the hoovering or in the car whilst you're in traffic with 3 kids in the back. So thinking about it as audio in general is where a lot of people go wrong, or having it as a value add to your audio buy or bundled into a wider audio buy is where people typically go wrong. Programmatic only buying, obviously programmatic is great, it serves a purpose, but especially when you're testing and starting out in podcasts, there's too much room for wastage, and really you want to be doing direct, really precise, precision buying in the podcast medium. And then finally, there's no point in spending all this money on podcast media if you're then going to serve basically rubbish ad creatives that are product focused or sale focused and aren't really doing a brand job. So as you can see, there's within audio 3 very distinct channels in itself. So we've got broadcast and DAB radio, streaming, so whether it's through a smart speaker or through Spotify or SoundCloud, and then podcasts, which is completely unique. And they're different both in the ways that they're consumed, the way that you can target, and the way that you can track and measure what's going on. So obviously broadcast radio, it's very passive listening. It's usually on in the background at home. Whilst you're in the car, you're not really focused a lot of the time on what's going on. It's kind of background noise, it's very passive. Streaming is quite similar. Usually it's through a smart speaker. 45% of UK homes now have a smart speaker in them. And it might be through Spotify or SoundCloud, but then you're only getting ads if you're on the freemium version. So that says something about the sort of audience that you're targeting there as well. And then finally, you have podcasts, where you have the opportunity to reach someone in an environment that they have actively gone out of their way to be in. Their favorite podcast episode where they're listening in a one-on-one environment. You can see the demographics of that podcast, the host, the content, and you can track and measure every single aspect from website visits, leads, purchases. So they're the kind of differences between the channels, and it's obvious why they need to be treated differently. Next is also the kind of wider audio trends. So as I'm sure you're aware, podcasts are getting bigger and bigger, whereas broadcast radio is declining. And this is research from Ofcom last year. So actually now the car is the only place where people listen to the radio, up by 47% in the last 5 years. So that's increasing. The amount of radio being listened to at home is also decreasing. And this is much wider gaps when you look at age demographics. So typically these kind of stats are being kind of held up by the 55 plus age demographic. When you look at more of a middle-aged audience or younger audiences, actually 18 to 34-year-olds, only about a third are listening to live radio in the car as their primary source of audio. They're much more likely to be music streaming or podcasts, and that's obviously because of the technology now in cars. And over the next kind of 5 to 10 years, that shift is only going to increase more and more. It's the same with streaming, as I said. So this is Ofcom data. Edison has it slightly higher in terms of the amount of households that have a smart speaker, where the majority are streaming music, and then the rest are listening to live radio. And you can see just behind me on a smart speaker, the share of ear podcasts are very, very small there with just 2%. It's not that only 2% of people listen on smart speakers, it's just overall listening that happens tends to be music streaming or live radio, where again, it's usually as you're getting ready for work in the morning, it's on whilst you're doing the cleaning. It's a different environment to the one-on-one opportunity that you have with podcasts. And then on the flip side, you can see here the amount of weekly podcast listenership in the UK is rising dramatically. Again, this is an Ofcom figure. The Edison research has it as slightly bigger, where 33% last year in 2025 of UK adults are now weekly podcast listeners, and it goes up to 56% when you look at monthly podcast listeners. And that goes up to 65% when you're looking at the younger age demographics as well. So you're looking at audiences growing more and more, but it's also the type of audience that are listening to podcasts. They're usually educated, they're informed. You can see here they're usually from a higher socio-economic background. And so you're able to chat to these people in an environment where they're seeking out information. And it's a really unique opportunity in this space where 9 out of 10 weekly podcast listeners listen on a smartphone. And not just obviously outload on a smartphone, but dialed in into their headphones in a one-on-one environment where it's almost like reading a book. You can't be passive whilst you're listening to a podcast. You're going to have to rewind and listen again. So there is a difference between the wider audio advertising and podcast advertising, where you have this unique opportunity to reach people in the most highly engaged medium that there is, more than YouTube, more than TV, more than social. But you have to do it in the right way. Before we go into a kind of real case example, I'm just going to hand over to Jay to talk about how it fits into Explore's ecosystem.
Cool, thanks Andy. So Explore, for anyone who doesn't know, Explore do adventure travel, small group adventures. So specifically cycling, walking, cultural discovery trips, anywhere the FCDO says you can go, we go there. So 100 odd countries around the world, and it's all small groups. The average size is about 10, 11, 12 people in a group. And we have local leaders who are absolute stars who really get you under the skin of a place really quickly. And when we look at our results and reviews and things afterwards, it's always the leaders that everyone says have helped them understand a country really well or an area really well. So they're vital to our product. I am probably pretty much bang on the average new customer for Explore. So we do have a really wide demographic. It's really normal on our manifest to see someone in their 30s, someone in their 40s, someone in their 50s, someone in their 60s, someone in their 70s. That's a normal Explore manifest. It's anyone who kind of wants to get under the skin of a place and actively lean into finding out about it rather than lying on a beach. That's really what we're about. But I'm bang on average. So I'm 53. I've got 3 children who have all just left home. The baby's just turned 18, but he's gone off to do an apprenticeship. They've all passed their driving tests. They're all earning money. Hurrah! Done. And I am well educated, really well travelled. I did backpacking around the world in 1991, 92. And I've been to a lot of countries since. That's really ordinary demographic for our type of customers. And being able to find those people is why we lent in to the whole podcast piece. And it's interesting where it does sit in our marketing mix, because we're pretty normal kind of mid-size business in that we do TV, but only at peak times of year, and we do some out of home, but really only where I can get it brilliantly cheap on distress. And most of our money is spent in digital performance marketing, and we do some digital events and those kinds of things. Podcasts, we can see, are doing a performance job for us because we can track it, and Andy will get to that later. But they're also doing a really great brand job for us, particularly with the type of creative that we've gone with.
So going more into detail, and we'll go into a kind of real case example, is what are the top tips for actually doing and treating the channel properly, especially when you're first getting into the channel and you're testing and learning? Knowing where your ads are served, it baffles me that people will spend so much money in this channel and in audio and then not understand where the impressions are being served. With podcasts, you have such a unique opportunity that you can ask the network, you can find out in a business category buy or a news category buy exactly which podcasts make up that category. And if you don't like any, take them out. Which of those podcasts are serving the most impressions? There's no point in having this kind of category buy where two of the big podcasts within that category are taking up 50, 60% of the impressions. You then need to go deeper and look at which ad slots are they being served in. We are always pushing to be in the pre and the mid roll. So average consumption of a podcast is around 75%, which means if you're getting a lot of post roll ads, or you think you're getting a really good deal because you're being offered all these bonus impressions, a lot of the time they're being put into the post roll. So push for pre and mid roll slots. And not only that, push for first in ad break. You don't want to have your ads, you don't know that they're actually ending up third in the ad break each time, which often, if you're buying programmatically very cheap, that's where they're going to get served. You might then not get heard because the ad before you was crap. So if you're first, you have the opportunity to be heard rather than just served. And that's something that we are always looking to do. So that's on a broader reach play where you might be creating 30-second ads that you then distribute across a large range of podcasts. But also you have this unique opportunity to align with hosts where you know exactly who that host is. You can look at the audience, the demographics of that podcast. You can get the Spotify first-party data, demographics of that podcast, look at the content, and really make decisions based on more than just data, but common sense and experience. Like, this is the right podcast because it's the right podcast. It's extremely important to have an audio first ad creative, and I might just hand back to Jay just to talk about it in the context of Explore.
Yeah, we know there's two ways in which our podcast ads smash it. And one of them is that we have chosen to use the voice of leaders. They're not our actual leaders that we're using, but they're actors being the voice of leaders. We do make sure we use native speakers from the right countries. It's not me pretending to be Indian. We have... because we're using the leader who's sucking you into their country and telling you something about their country, that means that we can use those same ads across our sales territories in North America, Canada, US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and it's not like an American telling a Brit what to do, or it feels right in the environment. But also using non-native English speakers means that it really draws your attention. As Andy says, podcasts are leaned in listening anyway. But even if you've just drifted off for a moment while you're picking up the dog poo, if as soon as you hear a voice that's non-native English in your ear, you kind of go, oh, what's that? And that means that the attention that we get is really good.
Yeah, and not only that, it's every single time we do a new ad. So we started 2 and a bit years ago, and we created 3 ads, I think, on the last bit of the tour from Italy, South Africa, and India. We now have Colombia, Benin and Togo, we have Costa Rica, we I think have 9 different ads
all
now.
in circulation.
All in circulation. So when we're doing a category buy, it means that you're not getting fatigued by hearing the same shitty ad over and over again, where the frequency can be a lot higher now because we have so many ads in rotation. We have true crime variants. So the more that you can get a kind of brand focused ad from the start and a structure in the creative, you can keep building on this. And every time the audience hears one of these ads, they know straight away it's Explore.
And whether they're host-read ads or ads that we've recorded, they all finish with the line, don't just travel, explore. And that kind of line heard over and over again, I think is really useful.
And then the third point, obviously tracking and measuring the results. As Jay just said then, it's not all about the conversions. It's doing a brand job as well. There's brand awareness, but it's working full funnel. But what you can do with tracking and measuring is we know, okay, it's not going to track everything, but for some reason, a therapy podcast is working really well, or for some reason this host that we aligned with is working really well in terms of conversions. So let's double down on that next time and find similar podcasts. So we'll just take you through now, and I'll just hand back over to Jay to set up the context of why our true crime campaign did so well.
It's interesting. Andy came to us and said, I've looked at your demographic and I can see that they're into true crime. I think it's like a guilty pleasure, but your guys are there. And actually it's great value because people worry about brand safety, which I get. But I've got a really smart, educated demographic. I do not think they're going to imagine that I'm condoning murder by advertising on a true crime podcast. So we agreed that it didn't feel like a big risk, really, and lent properly into it so that we ended up creating some ads that reference the fact that you've just come off hearing some mystery or crime, which means they're really embedded in the space that you're listening.
Yeah, and the other benefit is that because of these brand safety concerns from other agencies or brands, there's less brands actively advertising in this space. So rather than going really broad with, let's say, targeting females 45 plus, we're doing that, but within the true crime category and with select networks where we know the exact podcasts are going. So you're getting the same CPM, the same audience, but in a more concentrated space rather than your ads being dispersed amongst, the entire podcast ecosystem. So it wins there as well. And by working directly with different networks, I see Craig is in the room from Audio Boom. We've worked with Adalicious, Sony Music. We've worked with Acast. We can see which networks and whose networks true crime kind of portfolio is performing the best. So again, all these ads, every time we reinvest, the conversion rates are getting higher and higher over the 2 years. So as Jay said, we've kind of recognized the fact we're in this true crime environment and tailored the ad creative to that. And hopefully this is going to play. So you're going to hear the end of the podcast going into the ad break and then the ad.
There seemed to be maybe some juror confusion, even though the testimony was clear that that wasn't human bone. But there's other evidence that the jury believes they could support the verdict. But yeah, that was really a central screw up to the case that really substantially prejudiced John. There's no question about it.
Ooh la la, I see you like an intense story. But how about a change of scene, huh? Je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore. And this is Punti. He's helping us find travelers under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. We call it semi-hour. Semi-o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. Search exploredrive.com.au and don't just travel, explore.
And so you can imagine you're dialed into this podcast episode, you're hearing about someone's bones being cleared out. The last thing you want is some DFS sofa offer shouting at you in the middle of the podcast. We recognize we're in that environment, which immediately makes your ears prick up as the audience, and then it takes you into the Explore ad. And then again, like I said before, aligning with these specific audiences, and Jay, maybe you want to talk about the different products.
Yeah, so we have cultural discovery trips, walking trips, cycling trips, but all of our trips really are about getting under the skin of a place and understanding what's going on in that country or that area. And so, for instance, if we're looking for people for our cycling trips, what I'm not looking for is racing cyclists that, are all the mammals on Strava every weekend. What I want is people who like a bike, are good at riding a bike and want to use it to, for instance, get around Vietnam. We've got a wonderful Vietnam cycling trip. You really see a lot of the country and sort of discover it really well. So we can choose to look at podcasts that look like they're going to get that kind of cyclist rather than this kind of cyclist. Or here, famously, parents of teenagers are impossible for marketers to get to because, if you're looking for parents of babies, it's fine. You can do that. Parents of toddlers, there's plenty of places around that you can do that. But parents of teenagers, and alongside our mainly adult adventures, we do family trips, which are specifically really for parents with children sort of 9+ who want to go on a proper adventure and travel like travellers. And it allows us to find podcasts which are going to have those parents. Some of them are specific, like this one here says Teenagers Untangled, but some of them are just podcasts where we know a lot of the demographic are that age of person that's going to have those teenagers in their house.
Exactly, and Jay referenced this podcast. This is actually an independent podcast. So again, going the extra mile to look outside of networks to find independent podcasters where typically there'll have been way less ads on that show previously. You've probably got 100% share of voice whilst it's going on. And Rachel actually did 3 different host reads that were in constant circulation throughout that sponsorship. So again, less fatigue and more opportunities. So I'll just play this quick expert from here as well.
Spending time as a family away from the stresses of life is so precious, but hanging out at a beach club for a week, well, it can be a bit same dynamics, different location. My daughter came home from Turkey saying she hadn't learned anything about Turkish culture or history or even met anyone new and interesting. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Explore Worldwide. Everything's brilliantly organised for you with expert tour leaders who know all the secret spots so you can just turn up, minus the stress, and enjoy making memories. Imagine spotting sloths as you cruise along the waterways of Costa Rica, then flying through forest canopy on a zip wire, or falling asleep on a houseboat in the Okavango Delta, surrounded by the night chorus of wild animals. With over 400 adventures in around 100 countries, there really is something for every kind of family. Your holidays are precious, so do them properly without the stress. Click the link in the episode description to browse all of their family adventures. And don't just travel, explore.
As you can see, you still get that visual element to the ad, to the host read. It still feels very explore, and you don't even realize it's an ad until halfway through where she starts talking about the brand. It feels native to the podcast. And, you know, Jay mentioned the cycling. So we've been on the cycling podcast, promoting the cycling tours. The latest campaign had a 9.5% conversion rate to the website, tracked leads, tracked downloads, and the parenting podcast was worked really well too, with anywhere between 5 and 12% conversion rates to the website. And that kind of leads me on to here. So this is just a snapshot. This is only 5 of those podcasts where you can see the response rate, you can see the leads. We had 21 different host reads playing in conjunction during this campaign, as well as 6 different audio category buys. And as you can see, it's so easy to track everything in one place. The tracking partners are out there. You just have to go kind of above and beyond to make sure that it's all set up as you're doing the campaign. But this just allows you to be so much more informed when you're planning the next campaign.
Super fun as well as a marketer to find a new channel that allows me to evidence that it's more than washed its face. I mean, the return that we can track is really good against our podcast ads, and that as a marketer is so exciting. You know, I've been in the game for a very long time, and most new channels it's really tricky to track, or it's just digital clicks, right? And so to find something that allows us to be creative and do that top of the funnel thing, but I can also evidence that it's converting, is amazing. So we're spending 4 times as much this year on podcast ads as we did last year. Am I meant to speak here?
You're meant to speak here.
What do I say?
You can see that it's more than just these one-off campaigns. It's, as Jay was saying, how podcasts fit into the wider ecosystem and the job that it can do in terms of actually seeing the results in sales in the back end.
Yeah, it is very cool to be able to see how it's working. And it also means that we can use that same type of creativity across other channels as well. And we're talking to Andy as well about how we can kind of put a bit of video and things onto those ads and make them work across a whole load more channels too. Yeah,
and that's a whole other conversation video, which we can go into another time.
The one thing that has been exciting, the other thing that's been exciting for me this year is it's the first year, because I'm kind of bang on demographically, every time our TV ad goes on for the last few years goes on TV, I get texts from friends. Oh, I've seen your TV ad, blah, blah, blah. And this is the first year ever that I have had more texts telling me that my friends have heard us on their favourite podcast than I have people telling me they've seen me on TV. And that's super exciting.
I think we'll end on that. That's a good one.
Oh, can I do a bit of audience participation? Because you remember how all our ads finished, right? Don't just travel.
Explore.
Yay! Thank you for humouring me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We're going to be happy.